Bad Mechs, Jackrabbit. Written by Sean of Sarna.net, the greatest wiki there is. Read by Shrapnel. You could always tell things were not going well. When the top brass sent out infantry squads to dig trenches they hoped would provide some sort of defence against an onrushing regiment of battle mechs. Corporal Andrews knew better. Only a mech could kill another mech, or at least a bunch of tanks with artillery support. Some troopers in a hole with shoulder-launched rockets might as well be pissing into the wind. But what could they do? The 3rd Republican Guards had been scattered all over summer trying to put down insurrections spurred on by the SLDF's invasion, and with very few armoured assets to defend the capital. Officers were ordered to set up defences with whatever they had on hand, which wasn't a lot. "Private, get that machine gun squared away, then help me with this SRM pack," Corporal Andrews shouted. "We're going to need to have these reloads at the ready. Contact is imminent." The private gave a professional, "Yes, sir." But Andrews could hear the boy's voice crack at the use of the word imminent. They'd all heard reports of SLDF's ruthless conquest of the Rimworlds, and they knew no quarter would be asked or given. Andrews' squad also knew their odds of survival against a combined arms regiment wasn't particularly great either. But what else could they do? Just as Andrews was about to lay down his 3rd SRM pack, a distant cheer went up from the rear echelons, followed by the steady thumps of battlemech feet. Andrews poked his head above the embankment he'd incorporated into the trench network to see the Republican Guard mechs walking into position on the defensive line, their long gun barrels offering the sort of long-range support Andrews' squads desperately needed. "Thank God," Andrews muttered with relief, but then looked closer at his new mech support. It was difficult to gauge the size of a mech simply by looking at them on the horizon, so he instead inspected the soldiers now milling around each battlemech's feet and did some quick maths. A few body lengths tall meant they were light mechs, without the armour or firepower for a defensive action. Judging by the gun barrel diameter, they came armed with a light autocannon at best. "Sir?" the private returned with a radio in hand. "One of the Jackrabbit pilots is asking for a prepared mech position. What should I tell them?" So that's what they're called, Andrews thought. He hadn't seen this particular design before, but maybe they were hiding a surprise for the SLDF. "Tell them we didn't have time to make one, and make do with whatever cover they can find." The Jackrabbits had even less time than the infantry to prepare. No sooner had the private retreated to relay Andrews' orders did the first barrage of long-range missiles arrive. One struck the embankment Andrews had positioned himself behind and blew him backward into the trench wall. Dazed, he looked up to see the Jackrabbit firing its autocannon, the dull bark of each fired round just enough to pierce his muffled perception as he struggled to maintain consciousness. To Andrews, the Jackrabbit struck an almost heroic figure defending his less armoured compatriots from the onrushing hordes of monstrous metal, which Andrews could just make out beyond the crater that used to be his defensive fortification. The olive-drab SLDF mechs all seemed so much larger, angrier and deadlier than the Jackrabbit that stood above him, barking away with its autocannon like a yappy dog trying to scare a pack of wolves. It didn't work. More missile plumes came arcing downward to strike the Jackrabbit holding the line, then lasers, PPCs, and the supersonic crack of Gauss rifle slugs. Each Jackrabbit was torn apart almost simultaneously, with one a few hundred meters down the trench line erupting into a ball of flame as its ammo stores cooked off. The one above Andrews was struck twice by Gauss slugs and then fell over backwards out of sight. So much for our mech support. Andrews dragged himself to his feet, picked up the SRM launcher and placed it over what remained of the embankment. He wanted to shoot whoever thought those Jackrabbits were good enough to stand up to a real battle mech, but he would settle for popping one of the green monsters charging his position. Despite already having access to an infantry support platform in the Sentinel, or perhaps due to the dubious quality of the Sentinel, the SLDF put out a call for a light infantry support battlemech with long-range fire capability. Skobel Mechworks of Moscow won the bid with the first Jackrabbit prototype in 2763, and production began in 2765. The Jackrabbit would be approved for combat testing a mere 2 weeks before the Emeris coup, resulting in the entire production run falling into the Emeris Empire's hands. Thus, the Jackrabbit became a common sight among the Republican forces fighting against the SLDF throughout the Emeris Civil War. If fighting for the wrong side wasn't bad enough, the Jackrabbit quickly gained a reputation for being a lackluster light mech, even in its intended role. The primary complaint was its main armament, an Armstrong JJ Light AC-2. Although capable of striking out to extreme ranges, the light autocannon was woefully inadequate for penetrating armour on tanks or even battlemechs 5 tons lighter than itself. The Stinger, Wasp and Locust all had a laser armament more dangerous than the Jackrabbits, and all had either jump jets or greater speed to outmaneuver the Jackrabbit. Dismally ill-equipped against the most common light mechs in the inner sphere, the Jackrabbit compounded its shortcomings with extremely light armour and no cellular ammunition storage equipment case for either its autocannon or short-range missile launcher, leaving the mech incredibly vulnerable to incoming fire. Although the Jackrabbit was evaluated to have extreme high readiness ratings thanks to its ease of maintenance, this merely resulted in more Jackrabbits for the SLDF to destroy during its conquest of the former Terran hegemony worlds. Of the 500 examples which survived the Civil War, nearly all of them were mothballed by Comstar. All Jackrabbits salvaged by the SLDF were cannibalized for parts and supplies, and not a single Jackrabbit was taken during Operation Exodus. This was partially due to the Mechs' association with the usurper, and partly because veteran SLDF pilots were critically aware of the Jackrabbit's flaws. Even when Comstar activated the Com Guards for the Battle of Tukid, the 500 mothballed Jackrabbits were not sent to fight the clans. However, following the clan's defeat, Anastasius Vogt recognized the depleted Com Guards would need to restore its forces to defend an uneasy truce. Vogt then ordered all Jackrabbits to be stripped down to their bare chassis and rebuilt as the Nexus in 3055. Although even less armoured than the Jackrabbit, the Nexus relied on its speed and jump jets to avoid enemy fire. It also possessed a powerful laser-based armament that put the Jackrabbit to shame. The Word of Blake would then use the same chassis to produce the Nexus 2, and even the far-flung Scorpion Empire would casually ignore the battlemech's tainted history when creating the Star Python. The original JKR-8T was armed with an Armstrong JJ Light Autocannon 2 and a single Holly Streak SRM-2. A GM150 engine provided the Jackrabbit with a top speed of 97 kph, and 3.5 tons of ferrofibrous armour provided some protection, but not enough to ensure the safety of its 2 tons of ammunition stores. The excessive weight of the Armstrong autocannon prevented the placement of additional armour or a larger engine, ultimately dooming the Jackrabbit. 2 variants were produced to overcome the JRK-8T's deficiencies. The JKR-9R, nicknamed the Joker by SLDF forces, was developed in 2768 following complaints from Republican Guard forces. It replaced the autocannon with a large laser, an extra heatsink, and a full ton of armour, far more capable than the original. Fully half of all Jackrabbits spotted with Word of Blake Protectorate forces were of this type. The Word of Blake would also field the JKR-9W beginning in 3074, which came armed with a light autocannon 5 and an extended range medium laser. However, the Jackrabbit's iterations and evolutions maintained a poor reputation among many mech warriors, either for its negative association with the Rimworlds, Comstar and Word of Blake, or simply being a subpar design. Whatever Jackrabbits remain today are museum pieces best used as a cautionary tale of how not to build a light mech. Hello everyone, Shrapnel here, the Jackrabbit. A lesser known mech to be sure, but a fun looking one nonetheless. It looks like a cross between a primitive Cylon and Robocop when he has that extra arm gunny thing. Let me now tell you a tale of a meckjock who has tried for 2 years to incorporate the Jackrabbit into games. I haven't done it yet. I mean, first up, my group doesn't like playing in Jihad, which for a Blake-loving player like myself sucks, but also because it limits any chance to play it. So when I do get a chance, I have to take a Celestial, because I just have to. They're iconic. But I love this little guy. He's plucky and carries the weapon of the annoyance gods, the AC-2, which you know, in your heart of hearts, is one of the most fearsome weapons on the tabletop with that golden BB. Want to keep that gyro or engine critical? Don't test the AC-2. Yes, I know, highly unlikely, but this is Battletech, the land of make-believe and unlucky chances, hopefully for your opponent. Everything else about this little guy sucks, honestly. And he is incredibly hard to justify bringing, unless you happen to have some spare BV, of which, again, you could take a Locust, a Wasp, a Stinger, a Thorn, all for the same or less BV. I will get him on the tabletop one day, and I'm certain he will not live up to expectations, or for very long. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And as usual, thank you Sean and everyone at Sarna. You are doing Blake's will. Until next time guys, I've been Shrapnel, and this is Bad Mechs.